Okay, so for our chapter 12 example, we have two grocery stores, Food for You and Grocery Mart, and they are deciding whether or not they want to build new stores. So we have Food for You in the red on the left and Grocery Mart in blue on top. Each of them has the option of opening a new store, remodeling, or leaving as is. And their payoffs are there in our normal form game. So the first question asks if there are any dominant strategies. In order to figure out whether or not there are any dominant strategies, first we should play the game like we normally would for any normal form game. What does that mean? That means that we're going to go through and solve for each option that both of the firms has. So first thing that I would do if I were solving this problem is I would look from the perspective of Food for You and go one by one for each column of Grocery Mart's options. So imagine that you're for Food for You and you assume that Grocery Mart is going to open a new store. Now, since they're opening a new store, my options are 200, 400, and 150. And so of those, I'll choose 400. That means I'll choose to remodel. Do the same thing for the second column. Assume that Grocery Mart will remodel. So as Food for You, I'm choosing between 300, 450, and 175. I want the highest payoff, so I'll choose 450. Again, I choose to remodel. Last, let's assume that Grocery Mart is choosing to leave as is. As Food for You, I'm choosing between 400, 300, and 350, and so I'll choose 400. I'll choose to open a new store. Now we're going to do the same thing, but for Grocery Mart. So I'm going to assume that I'm Grocery Mart, and we're going to go down each column, or excuse me, each row to choose. So let's imagine that Food for You is opening a new store. If Food for You opens a new store, I'm choosing between 200, 400, and 150, and so my best option as Grocery Mart is to choose 400. Do the same thing for remodel, 300, 450, and 175. I choose 450. And finally, leave as is. We have 300, 350, and 300, so I'll choose 350. So we have one circle, or one square, where both numbers are circled. We're not done yet, though. We have to figure out which, if any, dominant strategies exist. Dominant strategies means that the firm always chooses that option. So, looking at what Food for You chose to do, we have 2 remodels and 1 leave as is. Those were our 3 choices. So, Food for You does not have a dominant strategy. Sometimes they choose to remodel, and sometimes they leave as is. However, Grocery Mart is a different story. Grocery Mart always chooses to remodel. Because they always choose to remodel, they never choose to open a new store, and they never choose leave as is. For Grocery Mart, remodeling is the dominant strategy. Okay? So Grocery Mart has a dominant strategy, and it's to remodel. They always choose to remodel. And Food for You does not have a dominant strategy. Sometimes they choose to remodel, and sometimes they choose to open a new store. So the second part of this question asks if there are any dominated strategies. That is, strategies that the firms never choose. So we know that Grocery Mart always chooses to remodel, which means that they never choose to open a new store and they never choose to leave as is. So, open new store and leave as is for Grocery Mart are dominated strategies. There's always a better option, and that option in this case is always to remodel. Food for You, meanwhile, sometimes chooses to open a new store and sometimes chooses to remodel, but never chooses to leave as is. And so, leave as is for Food for You is a dominated strategy. So, once again, Grocery Mart, they have two dominated strategies, both opening a new store and leaving as is are dominated strategies. They're dominated by the remodel option, which Food for You always chooses. Food for You, meanwhile, like I said, sometimes chooses to remodel and sometimes chooses to open a new store, but they never choose to leave as is. So for Food for You, leave as is a dominated strategy. Finally, for the last part, it's asking to solve for any Nash equilibria. This one is nice and easy because we have those three dominated strategies. Because we have those three dominated strategies, we're going to remove the rows and columns that are never chosen and redraw the normal form game. So since Grocery Mart only ever chooses to remodel, we're only going to have one column, and that's where Grocery Mart remodels. And Food for You, they have only one dominated strategy, so we're still going to have two rows. We're going to have a row for open a new store and a row for remodeling. And then let's finish drawing this box. Sorry, it's a little messy. And we're going to fill in the options, fill in the payoffs from the table above. So we have 300 and 450 for Food for You, and 400 and 450 for Grocery Mart. So let's take the perspective of Food for You to start. Food for You is choosing between open and new. They know that Grocery Mart will always remodel, so they're choosing between 300 and 450. And so we know that 450 is the highest payoff, so we'll choose that. Grocery Mart doesn't have an option here. They're always going to choose to remodel, so we end up having a Nash equilibrium down in that bottom cell there. No matter what Food for You does, Grocery Mart's going to choose to remodel, and so we end up at the equilibrium where Food for You chooses. So to wrap it up, we have a Nash equilibrium at remodel. Let's write that out. Nash equilibrium at remodel.